First, thanks to this great university, state of the art, to the students and the faculty here present, because you give us the opportunity to come back to university. As Cicero would say, how pleasant it is to come back to a university, to come back to the sources of knowledge, and to come back, in a way, to the fountain of youth. So thank you very much for that. Now, I will advance two concepts that have driven my life and that certainly are going to be my sustained ideas through this debate. Number one, I'm a Jesuit educated all along, where I learned that the shortcut to happiness is being for others, is doing for others, is doing for your community, doing for your nation. And that's been my life commitment. And that's why I was first in corporate world, then I moved to politics just because of that one single reason. And that's why we created this first presidential library outside of the United States, right there in the heart of Mexico, in the state of Guanajuato. I would then complete this concept by saying the comparison on San Ignacio de Loyola's position in relation to leading and in relation to being a public leader or a leader in government, that you gain respect from people through dialogue, through democratic moves against what Machiavelli would say, that you gain respect through exercising power with toughness, with the stick. And that respect you gain comes out of fear. And that's why they respect you. I think this is what is part of this important debate. And second, to say that half of what you see here in front of you is American blood. My grandfather was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. He came to Mexico back in 1895. Part of the family participated on the Civil War. And he came to Mexico without a penny in his pocket as a migrant. And he found his American dream there in this small place in the state of Guanajuato, where we've been for 5 generations. And I wanted to mention that because I'm not only part of this nation, I love and respect this nation. I love and respect its citizens. I love and respect its compassionate attitude all over the world. I love and respect this nation because of its leadership throughout the world. That's the United States I know, I've known in the past, and I hope I will be seeing in the future. Now, on this part of ideas, my position in relation to globalization and nationalism departs from having figures, facts at hand. Globalization, technology, democracy, and freedom brought us all over the world to the best ever peak in development and progress. It's absolutely incredible what has happened in the last 30 years. Every single human being has progressed, and many have progressed substantially. Today, we live much more years than we used to just 40, 50 years ago. Today, knowledge is present together with education in the last corner of the world. Today, middle classes are totally dominant around the world, and income has increased substantially, even including Africa and those nations that used to be called poor. So progress has been almost illimited. And yet, we will have to see this century many, many more surprises. So my question is, why should we destroy, disrupt the way we have proven to be successful for a new adventures that some call nationalism, that some call conservationism, that some mention that we should go back to the original state, nation state, and forget about what we have built. And we're going to debate about the European Union, the most successful bloc of nations right after World War II. They have and enjoy the best and highest standards of living today.
1 minute warning, Mr. President.
More or less. 1 minute. Seeing those incredible incomes way above even this nation. Everybody has access to full Medicare and full health attendance. Everybody goes to school and university. Everybody enjoys income that is really outstanding. So that's one successful bloc of nations. End up by saying that they got together and they decided together to build that region so powerful and so successful in the world. Nobody obliged them. They decided to go freely to conform that successful bloc of nations.
Thank you. Mr. Farage?
Thank you. Thank you.
You can walk. I know it is inviting, but walk just in this area so the camera will get you.
So this is the safe zone just here,
This is the safe space.
Okay,
right?
very good. Safe space, there we are. Well, actually, talking of that, good evening, Maryland. This debate is a victory before it even begins. Because the fact is we're having a proper, full, honest, open debate, and boy, there are going to be differences. President Fox thinks the European Union is a great success. I think it's an anti-democratic monster that is crushing democracy, ruining nation state, and taking away liberty. We have fundamentally different points of view on those big issues. But you know something? We'll be able to debate those issues in a relatively civilized manner. And what has been going so badly wrong in universities in this country and mine is this development of safe space. These narrow zones that some of us are confined to. The idea that because somebody else has a different point of view, they are basically intrinsically evil is not what parliamentary democracy is all about. It is not what our great nations fought 2 world wars and sacrificed so much for. Liberty and democracy is an environment in which we express our heartfelt opinions, but we equally respect the other side to have their views too, and we do our best through logic and through reason to make them see good common sense. And of course, all of this got worse after 2016. The twin shocks of 2016. First, of course, there was the Brexit vote, treated by the entire global order as if this was some terrible catastrophe. And if that wasn't bad enough, if that didn't have people choking on their cornflakes, there was worse to come on the 8th of November 2016, was there not, when Donald J. Trump did the impossible and became the 45th President of the United States. And to read and to hear so much that has been said in our mainstream media since those times, you would think that something dreadful had happened to both of our countries. And of course, that revolution of 2016, and it's something students in this university will be reading about for centuries to come, because something happened in 2016, and it was the rebirth of the concept of the nation state. You know, what had happened for decades is people had tried to build new, false, artificial, supranational structures. And the European Union, in a sense, was the prototype for a new form of government the globalists wish to impose on all of us. Indeed, had the blessed Hillary won that election back in 2016, I reckon you now would be very much closer to that European Union and very much further away from the idea that in a democratic system you can vote for people that make your laws, but you can equally sack people that make your laws. Like it or don't like it, men and women across this world want, by a massive majority, to live in an identifiable unit that is a nation. And they want their national flags. They want their national anthems. They want their national soccer teams to go and win the World Cup. That is what people want. It is the natural, normal human condition. It is the nation state to which we owe and pledge our allegiance. It is the nation state to whom we, albeit slightly reluctantly, pay our taxes. It is the nation state to whom, if things really go badly wrong, we're prepared to stand up and defend and fight for. Don't be frightened by Brexit. Don't be frightened by Trump. Just recognise that the world changed in 2016, and in future there will be governments putting the interests of their own countries first, but equally wanting to work with friends and neighbours across the globe. And yes, that does mean we want to control our borders. It does mean we want to be selective about who comes and lives and works and settles in our country. And in a world with a new terrorist scourge, how can you blame voters for wanting governments to do that on their behalf? So please tonight, can we debate these issues of open borders without people simply shouting racist, which is a substitute for having proper intellectual debate. The world has changed. Globalism got a real kick between the legs in 2016, and I intend to do my best over the course of the next half an hour or so to finish the idea off forever.
Start this by asking for a show of hands in the audience. Is the nation state obsolete? If you think so, if you think the answer is yes or C, raise your hand. Okay. For the television audience, it was a definite minority in the audience that thinks the nation state is obsolete. I think you have your work cut out for you, Mr. Farage. So let's start out with the principle that Mr. Farage espoused, that you can either be global or you can be a nation state. Is that true, President Fox?
No, absolutely not.
And remember when you walk.
I am for nation state, of course. Mexico is a nation state. Brazil, Argentina, Germany, Britain, United States. No conflict with that. But we, the world, have discovered that joining more than one, being two, means being five. And by joining five, you attain what 10 would. So working together, teamwork, as you do in corporations that are successful, you progress and you develop much faster and much higher. So no question about nation state. As I don't think that it should be questioned the great associations and partnerships that we have built together. One of them is this nation. This nation started with 13 states and today has well over 30 that confederated, that got together to work for one nation, for one dream, the dream of the founding fathers. If we believe him, pretty soon we might have a Calexit here, a California exit, like we have today a Barcelona and Catalonia exit. Are we going to divide the nations? We all have a flag, we all are patriots, we all believe in our own dream, and that's the way we work. But that doesn't have anything to do with dividing or forgetting about uniting by groups. NAFTA's been extremely successful. Start with United States. United States was lacking competitiveness and was losing markets around the world. And so the answer was, let's bring back those corporations to manufacture here. So General Motors, Chrysler, Ford Motor Company were manufacturing here in the United States, and they went broke, and you had to pay to rescue them out of bankruptcy. How did they come back live to the marketplace? By becoming NAFTA corporations. That's the only way they can compete with the Mercedes-Benz, they compete with the Nissans, with the Toyotas, with the Mazdas, with the Mercedes-Benz, and with all the rest. And they're back to life because they found that they can be very competitive and productive by working in Canada, working in Mexico, and working in the United States.
President Fox, this is an excellent point. Let's go to Mr. Farage. We're going to keep this debate going very quickly so we can ask as many questions as possible. So this is an excellent point, Mr. Farage. NAFTA made us competitive.
Yes, but hang
competitive
on.
with China.
Hang on a second. We can talk about NAFTA, we can talk about the World Trade Organization, we can talk about the United Nations, we can talk about NATO.
Stay on trade.
We can take about all these things which are examples of nation states cooperating together on the world stage. Whilst all of those organizations could do with reform, I have no problem with any of them or the concept of countries working together. However, that isn't good enough for the globalists. The real globalists want something much more exciting and far better than that, and they did it in the European Union. And you cannot be an independent, democratic nation state and a member of an organization like the European Union. Why? Because they make the laws that you have to obey. Their courts are supreme to yours, and they decide who is fit and proper to come and live in your country, not your own people. And there is nothing any government, any group of citizens in the European Union can do to change European law, because all of that is in the hands of the unelected bureaucrats. Actually, this debate of whether we want a globalist future or a nationalist or nationist future is really a battle of bureaucracy versus democracy, because the globalists treat democracy with contempt. Just look at how they speak about those of us that voted Brexit or those of us that voted Trump. I mean, we're all ignorant Neanderthals, according to these people.
You didn't vote Trump, right?
Well, I wasn't allowed to. I would have done.
Okay, just making sure.
I would have done. I'd
Sure.
have voted early and voted often. You know, I mean, I thought it was a change that was needed.
Well, this is interesting because we have a little bit of a nuanced argument here that not all of these associations, these global associations, are equal. So, President Fox, I want to ask you about the World Trade Organization. China was taken in 2001, and yet it breaks many rules. No one expected that such a large part of the WTO would also be a rule breaker. How do you deal with a problem like that?
First of all, what Nigel is advocating is not what Trump believes.
I think we've got a mic problem, sir.
Excuse me?
Do we have a mic? Can you hear him in the back? Sir, the audio? Can we hear him in the back? Yes? No?
Can you listen back there? No?
Otherwise, we'll just have to start talking. Yes, he can hear him. No, he cannot. We're going to bring the boom mic down. Continue, sir.
Where was I?
I think we had gone to the
You said that Trump and I don't always agree. That was the point you were making, I think.
WTO.
I'm fascinated. I'm all ears.
This is
There we go.
the
Thank you, sir. I appreciate
This
that.
is the main point. He argued that trading is good for everybody, that we should do it, keeping our nature of being nation states. But yet we can trade, like this nation has been trading since the beginning. of independence. And just remember, when Washington became president, first economic decision he took, let's send Jefferson and our best bright minds to Europe to sell our products. And this nation started developing its economy by trading. So trading is a key issue, and I'm glad that he believes on trading, but Trump does not. He thinks trading is I win and you lose. And if I'm not winning, to hell with NAFTA, to hell with China, to hell with everybody else. I want to recall to you, not long ago, global US corporations came out to the different economies in the world, and they forced us to open. So we had to drink Coca-Cola instead of drinking our great drinks that we have, native drinks in Mexico. We had to eat hamburgers and hot dogs instead of tacos and tortas. So we opened our economies to United States corporations, and they came in and conquered markets everywhere. Now that they are not being able to compete because of many different reasons, now you say, let's build a wall, because Mexico is taking away our jobs. You have lost the jobs because in manufacturing, you lost competitiveness. You cannot compete. And now you're saying, force Mexico to increase salaries. Welcome. I hope we do it as much as possible. But economy doesn't work by executive orders. And finally, this guy invents a story. There, the Mexicans are coming now. They have barrels of tequila. They're going to invade the United States. Hey, Congress, give me money for the wall. Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, today, the president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, stood firm and told Trump, we're going to start negotiating with you. If you don't respect us, if you don't respect our sovereignty, we will not deal with you. That's the same thing that China is saying, that Russia is saying, that Europe is saying. If you want to only win yourselves in trading, we're not going to accept that you impose tariffs and you start breaking down what we have built. WTO, yes, it's been striving to be a great institution to coordinate, to let nations have harmony on their trading, to avoid abuses from any one single nation. And yes, that's what's going to happen. If this nation doesn't want no more NAFTA, good for you. Enjoy. We have 48 trade agreements with 48 economies around the world, and we already started trading with Argentina and Brazil buying our corn. We buy 40 billion US dollars of corn to this nation, to 3 million farmers. Where are they going to sell their corn now? We're going to get it in Argentina and Brazil. And everybody is reacting to something that is wrong, to a guy that doesn't understand, which is the economy, which is trading, and which is harmony among nations.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, I'm going to come back on that if I can. Go ahead. To say Trump is against trade is a complete, total distortion of the truth. Of course, Trump is for trade, but he wants trade to be fair and reasonable trade.
Isn't trade by its definition fair? You're
Well,
not
when you
forced to trade with each other, are you?
Well, I spent 20 years in the metals business before getting involved in politics. I had a proper job before politics. It's pretty rare these days. So I know a little bit about the metals industry. And what the Chinese did is they massively increased production of steel at a time when there was no domestic demand and no international demand. They crashed the price of steel. They put out of business, in my country, major steel works. They did it not to make money. They did it as a big strategic global play. That was not fair trade. And Trump puts tariffs on steel, on Chinese steel, and everyone screams, isn't it dreadful? Particularly the European Union, who themselves put tariffs on Chinese steel last year. But they're the good guys because they're the globalists, and Trump's the bad guy because he's the nationalist. There is gross hypocrisy here to paint Trump out as wanting to shut America off from the rest of the world economically as nonsense, and whether you like the thought of the wall down on the Mexican border or not, this big, beautiful wall that apparently is going to be built, it's just a symbol, President Fox, of wanting to control borders. And I can tell you something, clear majorities of the populations now in every single country in the West want to have border controls. And wanting border controls doesn't mean you're anti-migrant, doesn't mean you're anti-foreigner, it just means you want people to come in who will speak your language, assimilate in your society, respect your values, be an economic benefit to the economy, and obey the law. What on earth is wrong with that?
Nothing that is wrong with that. Walls don't work. Chinese wall failed in avoiding the Manchus and the others, the Mongols that wanted to invade them. They built that wonderful, high, beautiful wall at a huge cost, and it didn't work. This beautiful fence that is going to be built here, if Congress approves, and if you are willing to pay for that wall, $35 billion US, we are not paying for that fucking wall. We, Mexico. More so, if you pay for it, good for you. Good for you, it's your money.
Would you have any border controls at all?
Mr. Farage,
what are you suggesting?
Mr. Farage, moderator's privilege.
I'm getting excited, sorry.
Thank you very much. I would just remind both gentlemen, this is a live broadcast. Please, let's watch our language. President Fox, to finish your thought.
Finish my comment. No, finish my comment. The way to have border controls is different. It's not with a stick, and it's not with the army, and it's not with walls. It's using your wisdom, it's using your intelligence, like President Bush and myself did, like Mexican Congress and two great senators and congressmen, Kennedy and McCain, who presented a bill to Congress. That bill has been sitting there since 12 years ago. The answer to migration control, because we want order in our borders. Of course, we Mexicans want order in our borders, same as any other nation. But the way to go is not that. Now, the big problem, and maybe I reserve for next time that you grant me, is migration. Migration. This nation built by migrants. Mexico and Latin America built by migrants. There's no many more natives left around. And against that, building nations by migrants today is the worst that can happen to the world. We say those are evil people, those are not welcome nowhere. And where is compassion? And who is going to own this world? And who thinks that you can build a wall so high that the hungry, the guys that are desperate, running away from violence and from war, like Syrians are doing now, they're going to jump any wall that you could build. So it's not the way to go. That's why I compare Loyola with Machiavelli.
I want to explore President Fox's argument about, thank you, about competitiveness. And I'd like you to address a specific question about Britain. Britain has very high taxes. Britain has regulations that are domestic, not from the European Union.
That depends how you judge it, but
the question is, President Fox has made a compelling argument that free trade, competitiveness, are the key to wealth, prosperity, lifting the poor, making them rich. Did Britain really have to leave the European Union to make itself competitive?
well, it's really interesting that the other thing the globalists want is they want absolute conformity. So the European single market says that everything in all those member states must be the same. They want the same rules, regulations on finance, the same environmental rules, ultimately the same taxation. This is not competitive. It's actually, if you think about it, fundamentally anti-competitive. And what is happening here is big global politics has been as successful as it has, until 2016, aided and abetted by the giant multinational companies and one or two of the big Wall Street banks. We are not living in an age of free market capitalism and competitiveness. We're living in an age of global corporatism. And isn't it funny that the blessed Hillary said to her big donors on Wall Street that if she won the election, she wanted America to join a hemispheric common market, namely America to join in with the European single market. No, this is not competitive. It is anti-competitive. It may benefit the rich corporations who want to run the rules of their own industry, who want free movement of labor to get as cheaper possible people. This does not benefit ordinary middle people in America, Britain, or anywhere in the West.
So could Britain have made itself more competitive?
No, we're not allowed to. 70% of our laws were not made by us. 70% of our laws were made by the European Union. Yes, we had a say in that, but we could be outvoted. And indeed, in the run-up to the referendum, on the previous 50 occasions the British government had tried to change legislation, we'd lost on all 50 occasions. So not only economically is Brexit a liberation, but, you know, some things matter more than money. And actually, you can't put a price on freedom, liberty, democracy, and being able to run your own country, to be proud about that, and to be the master of your own destiny. Brexit, I mean, I'm delighted, because normally, you see, whatever America does, American music, American food, American fashion, we nearly always follow everything you do a couple of years later. But in 2016, perhaps for the first time since the American Revolution, you followed something we did. We had Brexit, and then you had Trump. We were the trailblazers.
Okay, we're almost at 7 o'clock, but not quite yet. Thank you for all of these questions. Many of them are terrific, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. In fact, since we do have so many student questions, let me start, actually. President Fox, this one is specific to you. Does the Mexican government approve people from Central America to cross the southern Mexican border?
Of course, we have our own regulations for migrating. And to your knowledge, Mexico sends back many, many more Central Americans that come into Mexico, and they're shooting to get to the United States. It's about 500,000 people every year. And out of that 500,000, Mexico returns back 400,000. And the rest manage to come along and get here. But let me tell you that the problem of migration and the part of borders should be discussed on economic terms. Because what happens is, for instance, at the beginning of NAFTA, on the Mexican side, you would make $1, and if you learn how to swim and cross the river, or you learn to jump walls, then you will be making $10, tenfold. Who of you and your student would not go for 10 instead of 1? It's an economic problem that we have there. Why you don't have a problem between Canada and United States? Because it's a 1-to-1. And that's what Europe did, bring up the remaining, the guys that were lagging behind, bringing up to the income of Britain, Germany, and the gap has narrowed consistently. Now, that was the situation then. Today, 25 years after of NAFTA, the ratio is 5-to-1. This explains why there is so many less people coming from Mexico to the United States than the one going back. Plus the fact that NAFTA has accomplished its goal. Let's upgrade Mexico to make him a solid partner. Let's make out of Mexico a consumer market of 120 million people. And that is being accomplished. Now Mexico is there. We're full employment right now. Yes, we have just in my region where 10 million Mexicans live, state of Guanajuato, Querétaro, Aguascalientes, we have 11 huge state-of-the-art manufacturing plants. And guess what? Yes, the 3 American companies are there. But the other 8 come from all over the world. They come from Japan, from Europe, from Korea, from elsewhere. Why? Because we became competitive. We learned our lesson. We were taught you have to go to school, you have to be competitive to survive in the jungle of economic development. And we did it, and the world did it. But now that the rest of the world and Mexico became competitive, now here comes one guy and say, hey, no, we cannot continue like this. We have to stop this. We're losing. You're having the surplus and we're not having it. And then you say, Mexico took away the jobs. That's a lie. That's an absolute lie. Those jobs were lost to technology. Those jobs were lost to innovation and creativity. Those jobs were lost because the workers on the automobile manufacturing line didn't have the vision to go to a community college and learn about other things that they could make them competitive. Manufacturing will not be here in this nation to the future. It will not even be in Mexico. Manufacturing is a past wave. Now it's knowledge economy, now it's technology, and pretty soon, no more jobs. No more jobs in 5 or 10 years. How are we going to do it all together? I hope these kids here, they will come with bright ideas as long as Trump let you think by yourselves and not what he imposes. So that you have to think freely to innovate and to create what do we do when there's not going to be enough jobs for nobody in the rest of the world.
Is over. Thank you, Mr. President. I might add there was net zero immigration to Mexico when the US economy went into decline, just to underline one point of fact. Let's pick up this competitiveness argument with another question from the audience, and it concerns British politics, Theresa May.
Oh, dear. I was enjoying myself until then.
Based on her failure in the snap elections last summer, how much confidence do you have in Theresa May to lead Britain in Brexit negotiations, and I'll add a second, and to make Britain competitive?
Well, look, I mean, it's obviously very important when you're abroad that you don't talk down your own national leader. But she's hopeless. Yeah. Here's the problem, all right? Here's the problem. Theresa May is a perfectly nice woman, but she is a classic career politician. Politics has been her life. There's been nothing commercially outside of it. She doesn't really understand the real world. She's not, been in the army or worked in a charity or run a business, goodness knows. Nothing like that. She's a career politician. She did not vote for Brexit, all right? She voted Remain. And Brexit is the biggest political change in our country for a very, very long time. For good or bad, it is. It's an instruction that says to the government, we want you to turn around the ship of state by 180 degrees. And you can't do that unless you actually believe in what you're doing. She doesn't believe in what she's doing. She still, when she's asked the question, how would you vote if there was a referendum today, she can't say she'd vote leave because she doesn't mean it. So we are heading towards the big moment. And the big moment is March the 29th next year. That is when we're due at 11 p.m. to leave the Treaty of Rome. And even though after that she's going to have us wrapped up in a whole load of anti-competitive, linkages with European law and the European economy, despite all of it, I think we will get over the line on March the 29th next year. Under her leadership, it will not be a victorious charge. We'll limp over the line on crutches, but despite Theresa May, we're leaving the European Union on March 29th next year, and we will become, once again, a normal country like you guys in America. We'll elect our own people, we'll make our own laws, and it can't come soon enough. And after that, she can sort of slide off and retire.
May I ask?
Yes, President.
Specifically to the students, would you like to live within a wall, within 4 walls? Is that what you want? No. Don't you prefer thinking like Einstein and thinking like all the creators, all the Googles, all the Microsofts? We need to enjoy absolute freedom. there is hundreds of thousands, not to say millions of US Americans that work outside, that work abroad, and we welcome them because it's talent, because we like to share with other people. That's natural. It's happening all over the world, this exchange. This is why I strongly believe in globalization. I strongly believe in corporate world of America that has brought so much development and so much wealth to the rest of the world. And this is why I believe even in Wall Street. I believe in Washington. It's not the swamp. I'm here 3 days in Washington and I see no swamp except on the White House.
Back on that.
Wait, no, 1 second. President Fox, just to follow on another question from a student, do you think a nationalist wave could occur in Mexico as it has in the United States and in the United Kingdom, an anti-globalization reaction?
No, the situation in Mexico and Latin America is totally different. Our defenses, what we don't want to have, is what we had on the 20th century. Demagogue, populist leaders, messianic leaders like Evita Perón and the Kirchners, that they come with answers, that they can fix everything, that they can get the jobs back to you, that they can move the economy to grow 5, 10% more than what is growing. All those promises is what made Latin America to lag way, way behind. Because we sat down and we believed the dictator. He told us, you don't have a job? I'm going to get it for you. He told us, you don't have health and your family doesn't? I'll do it for you. I build hospitals. Promises and promises that never were complied with. And we believed them and we waited sitting there. What a different spirit you see in this nation. I go as far as I want. I go as far as I prepare myself in school, as I become competitive, as I use my mind, as I am brilliant. So it's on me. I was visiting President Kennedy's graveyard today at Arlington. And what a message, what a message. Don't ask your nation or your president what he's going to give to you. Ask yourselves, what are you going to do for your nation and the world? This is the thinking of this nation. And this new narrative, which, by the way, we must be very careful because they never tell us the full truth. I like to ask Senor Trump to tell me 4 years after he took over, what's his dream, what America he wants. He wants an America with a wall. He wants an America that everybody is controlled and everybody is supervised to do what he thinks is the right thing. He wants everybody to be a Christian. He wants everybody to be on his philosophy, not even Democrats or Republicans. Is that the dream nation that he's thinking of? I asked him the question, tell us where you're taking us. And I asked him to tell us where he's taking Britain.
Whoa.
Well, I tell you what, there's a really key thing here.
Hold on, moderator's prerogative. So you do or do not think Andrés Manuel López Obrador, a populist like Mr. Farage, will he win the election? Let's try to make some news.
No, that's exactly the evil, the worst part of Latin America is exactly like López Obrador. He already has solved the problem of the 120 million people.
Is he going to win?
Everybody's going to be rich. Everybody's going to have a job. Everybody's going to go do well. He's not going to win because I'm working for him not to win.
Sorry, Mr. Farage.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fundamental disconnect going on here, isn't there? It's all very well and good for President Fox to speak in idealized tones about free movement of people and no walls and no borders and we can all travel around the world and we must be compassionate to anybody that's coming from a poor country that wants to come and live in our country. It sounds absolutely lovely, but that's kind of what Mrs. Merkel said, isn't it? Mrs. Merkel said, as many of you that want to come, we can cope in Germany. And when you saw the lines of people coming, there weren't many women, were there? There weren't many children. There weren't many elderly. 75% of them were men under the age of 30. Nearly all of them came from countries where they would not even qualify for refugee status. And what have they brought into Europe? Yes, of course, plenty of them are good, decent, hard-working people. But sadly, ISIS and others have used that opportunity to literally bring terrorism onto the shores of Europe. And I say to you, President Fox, whatever your idealized view of the world, actually, the growth of radical Islamic extremism means that what voters across the West want is for their governments to protect them. And that is what democracy is all about. And I think it's still, I think too much of our mainstream media and our traditional political class do not understand there is this desire, this will to protect our borders, to make our future safer. And I think the people are right and the politicians are wrong. Someone shouted out racist. Isn't that grown up? Isn't that interesting? You know, the idea that we should stop terrorists coming into our country, the idea, and by the way, you know, I was the first person in Britain to recommend that we did give some Syrians refugee status, people who genuinely qualified as refugees. But I'm afraid, you know, I'm afraid we've lost this debate.
Excuse me, I said civil debate, please.
Well, it's okay to have the debate, but the fact is, you know, we finished up. No wonder Brexit happened. No wonder Trump happened, because you've got a gulf here between what the politicians, the traditional politicians want, and what the people want.
Mr. Farage, I want to get to as many student questions as possible, and thank you for these. These are terrific. A follow-up on that. If your vision is so great, why haven't other European nations voted to leave the Union?
Well, look at Italy the other week. 60% of Italians under 30 voted for the Five Star Movement or for the Northern League. Look at Viktor Orban, who is about to storm to victory this weekend in Hungary. Look at, apart from Macron getting elected in every country in Europe, there is now, and they call it a populist wave, because we're horrible people. You know, we believe in our countries and democracy. The European Union's days are numbered. Nationalism's days are numbered. People want nation-state control, and that is right, it is healthy, and it's the future.
Thank you. President Fox? We'll save the clapping to the end, because I want to get to as many student questions as possible. Another student question on Mr. Farage's theme. How do we deal with the issue of asylum seekers? Mr. Farage brought up a good point. Some of them are terrorists. Asylum seekers, like Germany.
Okay. Well, number one, I reiterate, I'm totally and absolutely for order in the borders, security and safety in the borders. And I use two examples how you can deal with that. One is NAFTA. NAFTA became an economic issue, and what we presented, I mean, President Bush, Senator Kennedy, Senator McCain to Congress, had evolved. Let's say this nation, growing at 2.5% a year, needs 500 additional labor to import 500,000 labor a year when you're growing at 2.5%. That's a fact. Now, how do you regulate that? And we did in that initiative that is in Congress. When the economy is growing, you open the valve and you bring as many as you need, like this nation did with the Bracero program right after World War. This nation took all the women and put them in factories and put them to work here so the men could be at war. But was not enough, and so they invited 2 million Mexicans to come and work here as braceros. And once the war was over, they kicked them on the ass and sent them back. No French benefits, no gratification, no nothing. So when you need, you import. Now, that import valve works today. Now, China. China's developed territory, the part that is highly developed with 300 million families, middle class today, that they have built in 25 years. Well, they have a valve to bring people from the interior only if it's needed on the developed areas. If it is not needed, they don't let them come in. They have to have a passport to come in. So you can regulate with wisdom and with good sense. Now, asylum, Jesus Christ, I mean, I know there are others, but I'm happy when I help a human being. I cannot see one of those Syrian boys dying on the Mediterranean Sea. Now, that doesn't mean, like he says, and he's right, that we can absorb everybody. It's growing the amount of people that is moving, looking for a better life. And we must regulate. But let's work it together. Let's work it with sense. The best answer is the one I exercise in my government. Let's go to the roots of the problem. Let's go there and solve the problem in their home, in their country, and bring up development. And that's what NAFTA did for Mexico. That's why we're not getting that many immigrants coming. We need to do that in Central America. And I created Plan Puebla Panama to develop Central America so that we can have the jobs there, so that we can develop that part and we don't get the migration. I know it's difficult, but it's worse to use a stick and to let people die on the Mediterranean Sea or die of hunger. Something must be done.
So President Fox says that we have to deal, thank you, we have to deal with the problem at its source. Mr. Farage, of course, the obvious source of the problem today, at least in the Middle East, is Syria. And again, another very pertinent question from the audience. In George Washington's farewell address, he warned against, quote, entangling alliances. Does a globalist viewpoint go against this view? What would a globalist or,
well, I wish we'd listened.
A nation or a nationalist?
I wish we'd listened to Washington and hadn't joined the European Union, because that was a foreign entanglement that did us a huge amount of harm.
But don't you need alliances to deal with an issue like Syria?
Look, I talked earlier about NATO, didn't I? I talked about the World Trade Organization. I talked about all these structures we have where we as nation states can cooperate with our friends and neighbors and work together to deal with joint problems, to make those decisions collectively. That is different to what has happened with the European Union and what the blessed Hillary and others wanted to do with globalism. They wanted us to give away the ability to make those decisions to other people we can't vote for and can't remove. And by the way, when we're talking about poverty, about dealing with the problems at source, perhaps the one thing that President Fox and I will agree on is the European Union has been a disaster for black Africa, a real disaster. They put huge tariffs on agricultural goods, on flowers. They pillage their fishing waters. And actually, what we ought to be doing in terms of thinking about the developing world, rather than assuaging our consciences by giving foreign aid, very little of which ever finishes up in the right place. If we really want to help the poor countries of the world, they're the tariffs that need to be cut. We need to give those countries the opportunity to trade their way out of poverty. And I would like to see an independent Britain outside the European Union actually becoming, really leading the world in doing this to genuinely help poor countries. Foreign aid isn't working, but trade and technology just might.
Follow up with another excellent question for Mr. Farage. Is no deal better than a bad Brexit deal?
All right, if I walk up to any one of you in the street and I say, okay, I've got a really bad deal for you, do you want it? I mean, how many people are going to say yes? Look, when you had Theresa May ever had a proper job and worked in the real world?
Haven't you been a European parliamentary member for 2 decades?
I spent 20 years in business, most of it working for American companies, but the last 9 years running my own business. I've employed people, I've paid my taxes, I've got a damn sight more experience than virtually everybody that talks about this European issue, all right? I feel quite strongly about that. Look, the point is, when you go into a negotiation, the other side need to know that if you don't get what you want, you're walking out of there. They're losing their customer. That is how negotiations work. They work, frankly, through fear. Fear that the other side is going to walk out of the door. And what Theresa has effectively done is to say, well, however beastly you are to us, however nasty you are to us, however appalling the deal is, we will, of course, being good Brits, simply accept it. Of course no deal is better than a bad deal. I'm sick to death of us being talked down to by French bureaucrats Democrats we can't vote for and can't remove. And unless we get an outbreak of common sense from the European Union in pretty damn quick time, we should just simply walk. Ta-da!
That word of fair, it's misleading. I mean, when you exchange something, and you can go back to the times of the hunter-gatherers, each one puts the price, the correct price. I do this pretty well, I'm very competitive, I want to sell it at $3. You decide whether you take it or not. So now nobody forces you. Trade's greatest advantage is that one. That is convenience to both sides. And the same thing I say in the case of the European Union. He speaks about they in Brussels. Who created Brussels that now he's calling a monster? Britain, England, Germany, France, Portugal, Spain, all of them, they created that body of administrating the trading and the building among all the nations. And they decided willingly to put that cohesive fund where every economy, the successful ones, provide 2% of their gross profit to that huge, that mammoth fund that they decided together that would be addressed to investing in education in Portugal, investing in Italy, investing in Greece and elsewhere. What for? To upgrade them, to bring the level of the rest to try to be this thing. And when you see distribution of income in Europe, it's like this. When you see distribution of income in the United States, it's from there or higher to here. And that's the same distribution among nations. They are very compact. There's not one wealthy, extremely wealthy, and the other poor. They try to use compassion, use solidarity. They try to go together. Now, a problem presented, migration. I know it's a surprise. It's more and more the flows of migration are expanding because there's more desertification, and so farmers cannot produce enough to get their food. It's wars all over, regional wars that go against civilians, and they have to run away from war, and else and else. How we can solve that, I don't have the solution, but I would take a different approach than building a wall. Because that's selfishness, and you're not going to be enough capacity to compete by doing everything yourself. I just cannot imagine Ford Motor Company, GM, and Chrysler forced to manufacture in the United States. You're not going to sell one car outside of the United States. And yes, you are going to tax all cars coming from abroad. What happens? You're going to be paying for your car 30% more, 40% more, 50% more, because the imported car has a tax and the local car has a huge cost. It's not competitive. So it's simple reasoning to trade and to win and win.
President
I
Fox?
would just end up saying, I mean, you don't go to trade, you don't go to play golf just to win. And if you don't lose, you abandon. You say, this sport is not for me. It's not the case. We win together by working together.
Thank you. I asked Mr. Farage 2 questions. I'll ask you then a second question, a follow-up on that, again from the audience. How has your experience with the PRI affected your views? Can you speak on the trade reform transition from the pre-monopoly to your PAN party? This is a question that revolves around that perfect dictatorship that lasted for 71 years and the PAN taking a different approach.
Reasons behind. Pre became corrupt, became a lousy manager for the country because it was a monopoly. And that's what happened with monopolies. That's the great virtue of democracy, alternation of power. So that you get smart, and if you're going to try to stay there, you come with smart ideas, or you're not going to be welcome. You're not going to be there. So that's one case that happened in Mexico. Number 2, I came back to support the PRI, but not the PRI, the men, like I'm supporting today Pepe Mid, which is the candidate of the PRI. I know he has that burden on his shoulder of pre-corruption, and he's moving out. He's not a priest and moving out. So I always go more for the person, not for the ideology. And I end up by saying, you visit China today, you visit the East, no more ideologies. They don't fight like dogs and cats here like Republicans and Democrats do every day. They're pragmatic governments. They work on technology, on exports, on trading.
They're
on
authoritarian regimes.
Huh?
They're authoritarian regimes.
Well,
they put people in labor camps. They torture them.
I began to doubt how smart is democracy, because democracy is not delivering. And that's why in Britain they're not happy with what's going on. You're not happy what is going on here in the United States. We're not happy with what is going out in Mexico. So it's not democracy itself, it's the people that run democracy, that work in democracy. They are not delivering. So I see pretty soon something different being born, some other way that we're going to conform governments, that we're going to take decisions, and how we're going to manage our countries. And this takes me to parliamentarian system. I think it's much better than presidential systems today, because you always end up like this, and you don't progress and you don't advance, because the only reason of politicians and parties is to destroy the other. It's not who brings better ideas, but who can destroy faster the other. And that's the way we're living today. That will not work to the future. We need to come up with innovation also on the political and the democratic arena.
Thank you, President Fox. Mr. Farage, your response?
I think the globalist cat was just let out of the bag. We heard President Fox's contempt for democracy and for what people think. I heard in previous debates him saying he didn't even think the Brexit result was a fair democratic result. And this is what the globalists want. I've no doubt that most of them are terribly well educated and frightfully clever and well funded by giant multinationals, and they think they know better than the ordinary peasants as to how we should live our lives. And 2016 was not just a short-term kickback against that mentality. What we said in 2016, despite terrible threats of economic chaos and plagues of black locusts that would descend upon our countries, what we said is, we've had enough of being talked down to by the globalists. We actually want to live democratically in our own nations. We'll cooperate with our neighbors. But honestly, President Fox, you talk about our referendum and democracy, I think, in pejorative terms. For many of us, whether in this room or outside, actually, the vote is the most powerful thing we possess as free human beings. We value it. We showed in 2016 just how potent and powerful that can be. And I am convinced that 2016 was not, as Mr. Blair and Mr. Soros and the Blessed Hillary would have us believe, a short-term outburst of anger. Actually, it marked a fundamental political revolution that'll go on sweeping through the West over the course of the next few years.
Thank you, Mr. Farage. So unfortunately, we are out of time, and we'd like to have another vote to see if we've changed any minds. Is the nation state obsolete? If you think yes, please raise your hand. I think President Fox may have won this one.
Sorry, I don't buy that. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. Now, actually, look, to be truthful, even though President Fox and I disagree, neither of us want to abolish the nation state, but the true globalists actually do.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your listening.